Welcome everyone to this masterclass, Future Proof Your Sales Organization, Preparing for Change and Uncertainty. Today we're focusing on equipping your sales teams to be prepared during times of economic change and uncertainty. Joining us today is Arup Chakravarti, Director of Sales Excellence with Equifax. Hi Arup, welcome.
Thank you very much, Joy. Pleasure to be on.
Let's start with Equifax and how it has shifted its model really to adapt in this post-pandemic world. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, if you know anything about Equifax, we're a credit reference agency. We have been incorporated in the state of Georgia and Atlanta since the late 1890s. Essentially, what we do is we provide other financial service institutions with the ability to make lending decisions about consumers. So if you or I, Joy, wanted to go purchase a car or wanted a line of credit or wanted a new credit card, whomever the financial services institution that would be providing us that facility would go to a credit reference agency. In this case, Equifax. The other big names are Experian and TransUnion. Would go to a credit reference agency to be able to then get some information around whether they make that lending decision or not. So for us, through the pandemic, we haven't really changed our business model. In fact, we've seen the ups and downs, and as any sort of cycle and macroeconomy changes over time, consumption is reflective of that, and that's absolutely impacted our business. We haven't fundamentally changed our economic model. That's what we do, and so it's very much a case of we've tracked through the pandemic, we've come out the pandemic, we're looking at opportunities. M&A, as in many companies, M&A is a strong foothold for us to be able to continue to grow our footprint, and we're staying where we're competitively strong. So in that respect, we have continued to remain within our competitive space. We've grown a little bit of it. So where we've provided consumer information, we're now extending that into providing commercial information. So should businesses, financial institutions make credit decisions and lending decisions to other businesses? So we're kind of getting into that commercial space. And we're also looking at, in terms of spreading our wings in identity crime and identity verification. That's a small seedling at the moment, but certainly growing. That definitely, a response to all of the consumption that migrated online through the pandemic, which naturally opens up for more fraudulent transactions, kind of more, essentially more kind of unknowns in terms of consumers and consumer identity. We've again started to play in that space and spread our wings into there to be able to get into identity products. So broadly stayed the same, but started to stretch our wings in a few other new places. In terms of our product service delivery model, that's changed significantly. So since 2019, we've been on a kind of a huge $1.5 billion investment program to shift all of our capabilities into Google Cloud. We're obviously making huge steps towards that. It's a massive transformation. So as with any transformation, it comes with challenges, but ultimately we'll be in a pure cloud environment. When we get through it by 2024, we'll be in a pure cloud environment and a much better player in terms of being able to integrate with financial services. So again, you think about a fintechs these days who provide typically totally digital experiences for their end consumers. They're looking in a lot of instances for kind of plug and play providers or partners being in that, essentially that kind of that cloud environment and utilizing that platform to deliver our services makes us much more nimble, much more scalable, and kind of much more contemporary in terms of the way that we provide services.
How are you approaching this then with your clients? Are they expecting this, or are they a little bit wary of what this all means when we're shifting to the cloud?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think they are wary, naturally so, particularly some of our tier one financial institutions, different players in this space that are expecting different things from us. Some more of the traditional banks, top tier banks, are expecting us to deliver as any tier one customer would. Maybe a little bit nervous about how things are going to go in terms of the transformation. And of course, I think, we're having to work with all of their information security teams to give them the kind of the confidence that when we transition over to cloud, we'll still be able to integrate with their systems and give them a seamless experience. We do know in terms of the capability that we're moving to from a Google perspective. And again, we've got a very deep relationship with Google on that basis. We do know that we should get better uptime in terms of our service capability and service delivery. So there are plus points for all of our customers in that respect.
Can you talk a little bit about the processes and the people related challenges that organizations need to adhere to?
I mean, without doubt, and I'm going to make a kind of a shout out to one of my professors at my business school, a gentleman called Professor Spiriondaitis, and he wrote a book recently where he used an expression which is we're kind of going through a time of kind of a VUCA period, right? Which as an acronym stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So he's essentially describing the period that we've been through and the period that we're continuing to go through as kind of being a very extended VUCA period. And as I've been reflecting on this, I think three kind of forces come into force when you're in this kind of environment and you've got an extended period of uncertainty and kind of challenges and kind of ambiguity as well. So number one is the kind of the environment itself. So the context at the moment with so many, certainly macroeconomic challenges, regardless of what market you're in. I mean, it certainly looks a lot better for the US. Interest rates going up to around about 4%, but not necessarily staying too high for an extended period of time. So whilst there are challenges across multiple markets, maybe not quite so challenging in terms of a longer term basis for the US, but in Europe and certainly in the UK, we're expecting our macroeconomic challenges, inflation with near enough 5.5%, maybe 6% at the top end inflation to persist all the way through 2023 and into 2024. So you've got a lot of that kind of challenge that's coming through here in the UK. I'm sure, Joy, you've heard the expression, we're very much defining it as a cost of living crisis because of the challenges that we've got in terms of inflation and in particular in terms of the energy prices and the energy price challenges that we have here in the UK. It is very challenging for us at the moment. So you've got kind of all of those macroeconomic trends that are creating that sense of uncertainty. So you've got that as kind of one force. The second force is kind of very much about the sense of individual concern, anxiety, stress levels as well that just continue to persist as you track through these VUCA periods. And effectively, what's happening here, the biologists will tell you that it's your kind of your right brain amygdala that's sort of triggering it's not an immediate fight or flight response, but it's a low level of cortisol constantly being pumped into your system. So you always have this level of background stress, right? And actually what that does is it impacts your decision making. So that's your second force in terms of this kind of uncertainty period. And then the third force is, again, just looking at this very specifically from a sales function perspective, is what buyers expect of sellers in this type of an environment. There's a really interesting bit of research that Rain Group delivered in May 2020, which again was sort of at the height of that first lockdown wave, which looked at 4 key areas where buyers were coming back saying, they expect decent sales skills or decent skill set coming from their sellers in 4 key areas, and they were disappointed in terms of how sellers were kind of behaving. And that came down to thorough discovery, being able to propose a solution that was fitting for the customer, listening to the customer, and so therefore again being able to propose that appropriate solution, and then being able to deliver a relevant and an appropriate return on investment case. So you kind of take those 3 sort of forces, the environment, the low level of background stress that we all individually experience, and ultimately from a sales perspective, what a buyer is expecting from sellers. And actually, what you've got is a potential where things start to derail, individuals don't, kind of perform at their best or perform at their peak, but unfortunately, to some extent, also perhaps miss out on the opportunity at being able to perform at their peak and miss out on some opportunities that we can all capitalize on. And then finally, of course, as you think about the macroeconomic situation, there are always going to be new use cases and new opportunities that emerge out of clients' challenges and clients' needs. So, as the macroeconomy changes, of course, clients will entrench themselves and perhaps be looking to hold on to customers as opposed to necessarily growing their book. I mean, that's kind of an obvious example. So if you're selling in that environment, how do you reposition your product or your service to help customers manage their retention or manage their their attrition levels, as opposed to necessarily trying to help them grow their business, which may not be appropriate through this time. And the reason that I wanted to do that is because I wanted to reposition our team within the context of helping drive that high performance culture. So when I talk to our salespeople about how should they manage themselves, what should they be thinking about as we track into 2023, it's those three forces. It's being aware of those three forces. It's being aware of your own response to the situation, your own stress levels. It's being aware of how to identify that with customers, and then hopefully help those customers, help them build a solution and help them build something that's more meaningful.
So buyers are more cautious when the economy is uncertain. How does this impact your strategies and the decision-making process for sales, for customer success, and even for marketing?
For sales, I mean, without doubt, we're kind of repositioning in the context of where would we expect to see some declines, right? So we're not expecting to see huge new applications, right? And that's true within the mortgage market. So we know that within the kind of the tier one banking space, we are going to have a decline in terms of our business, because those financial service institutions are going to see a decline in terms of their business. They'll see fewer applicants for credit products. There will be fewer applicants for automotive finance. For us here within the UK, we do have a couple of strengths as we look at the marketplace and we look at some of those challenges. Number one, strategically, we own a company. It's an entirely wholly owned subsidiary of Equifax UK. It's a company called TDX, the Debt Exchange. And the Debt Exchange provides debt collection, debt recovery, and debt portfolio sales in a marketplace environment. So whilst Equifax positively benefits when the economy is going up, because when the economy is going up, consumers are more confident. They're looking for more credit and loan products. Banks are more confident. Sometimes interest rates are lower, so that banks are much more open about being able to lend. And that's what you have when the economy is climbing. And then actually we benefit from that because, again, more consumers are undertaking the desire to apply for credit products. We get the benefit, we get the revenue when those tier one institutions come to us. On the flip side, when the economy is going down, we then, we have kind of the division, the line of business, and the associated products and services to look at debt collection, debt recovery. So as unfortunately consumers go through the other end of the cycle in terms of being over leveraged, then suddenly finding that they're falling into default, we have, of course, the capabilities there as well. So we do have a revenue stream that comes to us from that perspective. In the context of sales, yes, we're looking at, and this is an opportunity, a broader GTM opportunity that I'd say we haven't at all cracked, which is we have those two lines of business, but we don't have a common sales force across those two lines of business, right? So at the moment, it is very much about just getting back to basics and saying, if you're in our credit reference agency and you're selling credit reference products, you need to get better at understanding the debt services part of the business and vice versa. So there's a huge amount of opportunity. Again, as I said, it's perhaps back to basics, but there's a huge amount of opportunity in terms of understanding who's selling what, how do we better educate within the organization, how do we flesh out the debt service opportunities and probing questions that some of the other sales teams should be asking to be able to discover some of those opportunities.
Do you heavily focus then on existing customers during this phase? I mean, no one wants to be status quo. No one wants to be stagnant. We always want to find new business. But do you still obviously really try to let your existing customers know, we're here, whatever your needs are, we've got your back?
Number one is having our renewal strategy in place. We could do, as any organization, we could do a significantly better job when it comes to being proactive around customer retention, customer renewals. We have some very large scale customers, and we absolutely want to ensure that our kind of renewals process is totally proactive. Ultimately, again, we're aspiring for that. Again, within the context of sales excellence, under that broader umbrella, again, we're kind of aspiring, the way that we're going out to the sales teams is to build out processes and get them to flag early to us. Some of these, again, Joy, some of these are basic 101 hygiene factors. Like, we don't necessarily have all contract end dates all in one place, right? So it's just about, we need to collect some of these hygiene elements so that we've got clear visibility over whose contract is ending when might they start to think about going towards tender, how do we even proactively, how do we work with them so that there is no need for them to go into a tender process, so that they know that we've got their back, and that they can continue to get value from us. Public sector clients oftentimes are regulated and have to go through a tender process, but certainly within the private space, we should be able to hold that off. We should be able to say, why are you going to? You shouldn't even be going to tender. This is just another 3 to 5 year extension, and that's how the conversation should be. So again, within that broader sort of umbrella of sales excellence, I'm trying to get that process in place, which is we should be aspiring to no RFPs. Really, there shouldn't be any tender processes, particularly within the private sector. Now that's probably unrealistic, but that's okay. If we kind of aspire to that, then we can start to get all of the process elements in place to ensure that we have that great proactive set of conversations with the customer. So number one, absolutely, existing clients, we've got to focus on those. Number two, I'd also say even put aside the kind of the uncertainty and the challenges and the macroeconomic challenges that we've got at the moment. As I've been getting into the data and analyzing our top performer segment of sales reps, it's really clear to me that the top performers are engaging really well with their existing customers. And what I've seen from our top performers, without doubt, is their ability to go into existing customers and really sort of start to bring in new products, or existing products, but positioned within the context of new use cases. And they're constantly having those conversations. They're constantly having that level of engagement. They're constantly probing. They're constantly trying to understand those customers and the challenges and the concerns, etc. And they're absolutely working well towards servicing that. So I'm not saying we're not going to focus on new business. Of course we are. I think the new business side is going to have some challenges. Where we could have previously gone in and sold to new logos, talking about the service that we provide. Some of that will be suppressed as we track through 2023, 2024. Subprime, as a sort of a subsegment of financial services, may very well grow through this period. I don't know Equifax's appetite well enough at this stage to be able to say, is that a space that we want to play in or not play in? My sense is that more traditional financial services will not struggle, but they'll certainly be suppressed. Their revenue will be suppressed, and so therefore trying to find new business or switched business within those spaces is going to be a lot more challenging. So I think holding on to existing customers, probing deep, and then finding the cross-sell, upsell opportunities is absolutely the place where we want to be.
Well, Arup, when you advise your teams, then are you advising your teams to drive as many sales as possible today, or are you preparing for the future? I know you all had already mentioned that with your existing clients, you don't take for granted, obviously, uh, the the sales that you have, the relationships that you have with existing clients. But how do you prepare your sales teams that are also looking for new business, looking to the future?
Again, we're a publicly traded company, so we have to be on point when it comes to forecasting our quarter and knowing the contribution that we're making up into Equifax Global and how that will then ultimately get reported to the street, etc. So we do run our business on a quarter-to-quarter basis, of course. And that has its pros and cons, because that kind of, as you know yourself, Joy, that sort of can have the risk of making you very short-term focused. And sometimes that happens, right? I entered the business and we were in Q3. As we exited Q3, there was, a huge amount of focus on Q4, just getting Q4 right. So we run a fiscal calendar, a US fiscal calendar. So we run from January the 1st all the way through to December 31st. So our final quarter was October to December of last year. And there was a huge amount of focus on Q4. We needed to make the number. We've had some challenges in terms of regularly making our number on a quarter-over-quarter basis. So it was important that we tried to make our number. Again, some challenges. I think we got very close to it, which is really positive. But I think the challenge that we have in that process is that we then end up taking our ball off the business development that we need to be generating, that continual business development we need to be generating to then come into Q1 and already be in a positive place. And frankly, again, I'll openly admit that we don't have the number of deals and the volume of deals in our CRM system that I'd like to be seeing there, because essentially we spent so much time and energy on Q4 that we didn't put quite so much energy in terms of getting ourselves ready for Q1, right? So that is part of the challenge that we have here from a mindset perspective. The other thing that I see in the data is that, of course, there's a lot of deals that get pushed out of Q4 and into Q1. Okay, wonderful. But then that data finally gets cleaned up in Q1. Well, it should have been cleaned up in Q4, right? If it wasn't really a deal in Q4, should have flagged it as not a deal in Q4, as opposed to just pushing it into January or February of this year, getting into this year and then going, actually, that's not really a deal. So I do think that we have some challenges in that context, as any organization has, in terms of data quality and ensuring that there's a kind of a consistent, disciplined approach in terms of how we're tracking and measuring and flagging deals. But the biggest challenge is just that mindset piece in terms of continuing to maintain consistent quarter over quarter discipline around doing the prospecting, doing the opportunity identification, whether it's new logos, doing prospecting, whether it's existing customers, doing, kind of opportunity identification, opportunity discovery. That is a challenge. And I see that in the numbers too. So we get towards the end of the first quarter and there's a huge spike of leads and opportunities being created in CRM. And then it dips down into Q2, Q3, and then a little bit of a spike towards the end of Q3. And then it kind of dips down again through Q4. Well, that should be much more even. And when I look again at the high performers in the organization, their lead/opportunity generation in CRM is much more even through the year. So they're constantly thinking about 1 to 2 quarters ahead, constantly. A couple of weeks back, I was listening to Dame Kelly Holmes, who's one of our recognized Olympians, and she was talking about this common message. She was talking about, if you want to get to high performance, it's about doing your disciplined activities day in, day out, day in, day out. It's about sleeping well. It's about eating well. It's about exercising at the right time. It's about resting well. It's about recovering well. And it's exactly the same for our sales teams. If you want to get to that disciplined approach in terms of having the right level of opportunities and leads created each quarter, instead of having certain quarters with a huge spike and then finding 2 quarters down the line, you don't have enough in terms of the deals moving through the sales process. You've just got to get more disciplined at making sure day to day you're picking up the phone, you're sending out those emails, you're doing your prospecting, you're engaging with buyers, you're talking to existing customers about their challenges. You're doing all of those engagement activities that will allow you to have that continual flow. I don't know if I answered your question there. I mean, I do want our sales teams to be looking to the future. We do, of course, have to be cognizant about the present. We've got to get through each quarter and ensure that we deliver against the quarter, particularly when there is going to be so much more, in a way, there's just going to be so much more scrutiny of how we're delivering our numbers, and in particular how we're projecting our forecasting our numbers as we go through this kind of more challenging economic time. There's going to be a lot more scrutiny from our global corporate office around that. Absolutely appropriate. So we've got to focus on that. We've got to get each quarter right, but to do that at the detriment of not continuing to think about that sort of approach, each measured approach, that cadence, that balanced approach each quarter, that's a massive miss.
Can you briefly highlight the role then of sales and enablement during these times of change and uncertainty, dealing with tighter budgets, dealing with new business?
I mean, for me, first and foremost, it's about getting the sales enablement strategy right and getting that locked in. A little over 6 months ago, within the first 2 to 3 months, I sort of figured out where we were in terms of the training agenda, the tooling agenda, even some of the processes, and we've got a lot of opportunities, right? So we've got everything from so to give you a little bit of color, we don't even have a proper CRM system. So one of my first jobs is getting Salesforce installed. So we're going through that right now. And because we don't have a proper sales CRM system in place, we don't have consistent usage of our sales process. So sales process is there, it's documented. We use Miller Hyman, certainly in terms of the sales stages, but everybody interprets it in a totally different way. So you've got no CRM, you've got no consistent sales process or understanding of sales process. And again, that has so many downstream impacts, whether it's how a sales leader coaches an individual, or whether it's from an ops and enablement perspective in terms of looking at the data that's in our pseudo CRM system and being able to get some pipeline insights and performance insights from that. Sales training, there hadn't been any sales training delivered since, some of the team tell me, since 2017. So again, huge gap in terms of sales training. Building building out the strategy wasn't challenging. The challenging bit for the strategy has been, we can't do all of that. I have only three people in the team, two backfills, three people in the team, two backfills. So I haven't got enough, bandwidth in the team to be able to do all of these different bits and pieces. As much as we would love to do all of these things, we're clearly going to spread ourselves too thin. So the strategy process was really just a collective refinement with senior management. It was a collective refinement and agreement of what should we focus on and how would we go about doing it, etc. If I think about next year and I think about what we're doing in the first quarter, number one, a lot of it is going to be training focused, and we'll take two dimensions against the training. Number one is product training. We're not trying to reconstruct any of the existing materials and information that have been delivered from the product and product marketing organization. Not at this point. There's no point in trying to do that. I think all we're trying to do with product training is just bring everything into one place and signpost to it. No joke, Joy, we have something in the order of 71 products that are sold in a B2B context. So if you're a new person coming into Equifax UK and you're suddenly presented with all of this information and it isn't curated and organized and signposted, you'll be lost. You'll just be like, where do I start? And how do I learn? And there are so many different flavors of kind of products, which kind of overcomplicates, in some regards, in some instances, overcomplicates the situation. So number one for us is just this whole training agenda, getting the product piece right in the context of, we're calling it a product navigator, so that it just is a simple launch pad from where you can go to different products, learn about those, have high level bits of learning, have deeper pieces of learning, and then start to structure out. Again, we're not trying to overkill this. I'd love this to be, if you join the organization, what do you need to know to be 30 days in, 30 days client ready, 60 days client ready, 90 days client ready? I think that's, at this point in time, that's a little bit of a luxury. I think we're just trying to get all of the information in one place, keep it simple, kind of almost have a high level view and then a slightly deeper, more technical view if needed, so that, if you want to go that level deeper, it's there, and work with the product organization to get all of that in place. And that's a key focus for Q1, that and sales training. So to get sales training in place, get the CRM in place, get a consistent sales process defined. So working through that with all of the sales leadership, just to get all of that designed out and kind of the consensus view in terms of how sales process should be executed, and then utilize that to be able to start to train as the sort of the underlying foundation for sales process. But of course have things like large account management planning in there, strategic planning, account planning, etc., all of those components in there, and start to build out a training program. I'm sure a lot of your audience as well on this show, they probably have established sales enablement teams. Even if they're smaller organization, all you need is one or two heads in a smaller organization, and actually you've got a level of sales enablement maturity, which is fantastic. So I'd say we have the sponsorship, we have the desire from a senior management for us to deliver a robust sales enablement program. We just have a lot of gaps to cover, and actually as a result, it may sound like what we're doing is very basic, but that's the reality. We sort of need to start off by doing something quite basic and getting that training in place and getting that sense of investment for all of our sales teams. The way that go-to-market has changed over the last 2 to 3 years has been kind of really interesting and sort of really eye-opening to see how those companies or those firms that are championing orchestrated go-to-market, how they're really able to capitalize on that and actually really move forward in terms of better performance. Now, in the context of, how does that play out for the individual rep? I mean, I think this seems to be quite consistent across the board. Most organizations, particularly in the B2B SaaS space, have been tracking about 40 to 45, 46% in terms of reps achieving quota. So I think, it's been a challenging year if you're in B2B SaaS, particularly if you're VC funded, if you're in a startup or a scale up, etc. It has been a challenging year. So I think that there are some of those external factors that are in place that are perhaps influencing or impacting quota attainment. But put that aside, absolutely, I completely agree that, kind of GTM orchestration is really important. and in many respects, when you kind of sit down with a group of different stakeholders and you ask them what go-to-market means to them, so many different people that, I mean, everybody has a different explanation or a different view on it, or a slightly different perspective in terms of how they individually define and describe go-to-market. And I think that's part of the challenge. What you then end up with a sort of a go-to-market approach or go-to-market function that's owned by multiple different parts of the organization without necessarily one central owner. And I do think that's challenging. I saw that as a key challenge at Elavon, and I see it as a potential key challenge for us here at Equifax, that if we don't have one coordinating function that builds out the strategy, that talks to sales, to marketing, to customer services, to enablement, and says, okay, here's the campaign, here's how we want to run the campaign. As opportunities emerge in the organization, they will come up through the front line, which is sales. They'll come up through marketing, which is, being able to explore different channels, different technologies, different growth in technologies, different growth in marketing practices. They'll come up through customer services, again, another frontline, activity, or they may even come from, say, like the sales enablement organization, again, a little bit like marketing, understanding growing practices within the broader marketplace, etc. So some of these ideas, naturally, these ideas will emerge from a number of different areas, but having one function that can help coordinate, okay, if it's a campaign that requires us to do A, B, C, who's on point for A, who's on point for B, who's on point for C, when do we need to train our salespeople, what are some of the messages, what are some of the collateral that would need to go out, how do we coordinate the collateral so that it's effectively persona/vertical based, how do we ensure that we've got the right the right channels of communication being utilized, all of these different pieces. I don't see us owning quite so well, and I think there is an opportunity for that. There's an opportunity to have an individual or a small team that kind of owns that go-to-market capability and is able to coordinate all of the inputs and is able to see what the output needs to look like. And then with a kind of ultimately a bit of a project management skill set, is able to then get that execution to fall into place with everything carved, I guess, into its respective slot, right? So I do see that as an opportunity, certainly at Equifax, absolutely at Elavon.
But what changes have you seen that's been really instrumental to your growth as a sales leader that you've learned from, that you're carrying with you now onto this new job?
And so let's track back to the first major crisis that we've had, right? So, I mean, we've been talking about the theme for this session podcast is leading through times of uncertainty. So let's go back to the kind of the last major one that we had. I know we've had one very recently with a pandemic, but of course, if you track back to 2008, 2009, a huge amount of uncertainty then. What I'd absolutely say that I learned from that period, that's I think influenced and helped me grow through the subsequent decade. Number one, I think, is and I mean, reflect back to the role I was doing then. I was working on Salesforce delivery, kind of doing the CRM product management role for American Express in merchant services. And as we entered the financial crisis, I was working kind of a product ownership role on international basis across 21 markets, so global in many respects, looking to deploy that capability out. I'd say what I learned from that, really, really important to me, was the sense of balance, the sense of professionalism, the sense of maturity, and I think also, interestingly, at the time, I was, of course, worried that I was going to lose my job. I think what I learned from that is two things. So number one is, if you're intelligent about your investments, you know that you've got to invest for when you come out of the other side of that cycle. And in many respects, it sharpened my professionalism. It made me feel that whilst I didn't have anything to prove in a way, I wanted to make sure that every single interaction that I had with every single internal stakeholder, I was delivering CRM, so my audience were all internal. Every single interaction that I had needed to be on point. Everything needed to be super professional, absolutely, with a desire to kind of delight my internal customer, absolutely delight my internal customer. It had to be that, because this was a period of time where there was an incredible amount of pressure. There were cuts that were coming in left, right, and center in terms of job cuts and redundancies that was happening across the globe, not just within our company. And having that professionalism and that gravitas and I tried to do it in a way that was still delightful. I tried to do it in a way that was still positively impactful. I tried to do it in a way that still conveyed that positive element of we're building something here. I know that, I'm lucky to have a job in the respect, but actually at the same time, we're building something here and I'm central towards building something that's really important so that when we come out of the pandemic, out of the financial crisis, we'll have that capability to rely on. I think the same is true for how I've then conveyed myself through the pandemic. And it's absolutely going to be true for how I personally convey myself and how I've asked my team to convey themselves as we track through, the next sort of 12 to 18 months as well. So if you're starting off in sales enablement, you may have come from a sales background, you may have come from a learning and development background, you may have come from an HR background, etc. I think, as with all sales enablement, as with all services, you've got to deliver a great service. You've got to deliver a great product. So absolutely be super clear in terms of your sales enablement strategy. Training is going to be such a core part of it. Content is going to be such a core part of it. Tools and sales tech capabilities are going to be such a core part of it. But being able to focus on what's important at a given point in time, because there's never going to be enough bandwidth. So being able to focus on what's important at a given point in time and having the right strategy and being able to collectively prioritize and get the scope right, that's absolutely key. I mean, I think that's inherent to being able to deliver well within the sales enablement context. It's perhaps been my most recent transition into Equifax that's helped me kind of almost switch my perspective a little bit, my own mindset a little bit. And I think what I've noticed about sales enablement is we always end up talking about what I call the kind of the features and the benefits of sales enablement. We talk about features. We want to do this piece of training, or we want to look at that piece of content, or we want to look at this capability. And we talk about the features and kind of the benefits of it. We don't necessarily take a step back and look at the whole picture and the kind of the sort of the entirety of what we're trying to do. And my role at Equifax, I've kind of been given to a certain extent, but also equally put my hand up to say, let me help build a culture here. Let me help influence the way that we think about who we are as an organization, what excellence means to us, how we want to perform, how we want to build out a culture that isn't just about getting through the quarter or the year, but actually dovetails into how do we want to look at succession planning? How do we want to look at growth within the organization? How do we want to have the right roles in place? Again, some of that may sound basic because, again, for a large number of more mature sales enablement teams, you probably have a curated learning pathway, a succession pathway, etc. Amazing. We've got a little bit to do on that, but I've got a great opportunity to be able to do that in the context of helping develop and grow the culture at Equifax UK. So I'm really excited about that. It means that I'm not just talking about the features and benefits of sales enablement. I'm kind of talking about the so what, the impact of it, which ultimately to me is building up a high performance culture.
As we wrap up this session, Arup, tell me, what do you hope to see happen then, really, in, let's say, the next 2 years or even the next 5 years in the world of selling?
So for me, over the course of the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to be looking at instilling that and continuing to instill that culture of one-to-one coaching, not through my team. It has to be through sales leadership. Again, if any of your audience out there have an amazing sales coaching culture, please, I would love to hear from them because, I'm always open to feedback and always open to learning more. So for me, number one, I think coaching is obviously going to be key in terms of continuing to help reps develop their skill set. And I think that's really important, particularly as we go through, more challenging periods. Number two, I think from a sales enablement perspective, I think, being able to help define and build out and progress culture and performance excellence is again, it's going to be kind of key in terms of helping individuals understand where they land in an organization and what kind of pathway that they have through that organization. Holding on to employees is again, it's really key. We haven't really talked very much about that, but there's been a huge amount of churn, obviously, within the context of the entire labor marketplace, certainly through the pandemic, certainly through the course of 2021. Some of that will, I imagine, stabilize a little bit as we track through 2023. It has to, particularly here with interest rates going up. That means there will unfortunately be, cuts within the labor marketplace. There will be job losses. So the ability to necessarily move around quite as much as that there has been in the last 24 months, I think that will start to reduce naturally. I think that's what will happen as we go through a recessionary period. And so it's incredibly important for all organizations to be able to hold on to the employees that they do have and to ensure that those employees have a great working experience. And I think the third piece is, and it's interesting, for me, certainly within the Equifax context, I think just getting the operating model right is really key. So whether that's when I say operating model, you could describe that as the GTM function, the GTM capability that we've just talked about at a more broader level, or you could individualize it into the different sort of stakeholder sets within GTM. So within sales, getting the operating model right. So having a CRM system in place, having sales process in place, having the right motivation plans in place. These are all component parts of a go-to-market model, a broader go-to-market model. So getting the operating models right within each of the environments, but in a joined up way is absolutely key. It's going to be the sort of the, without doubt, it's going to make the difference between those that win and those that that struggle. Having that joined up conversation between marketing and sales, having an approach where sales surface out opportunities and marketing are able to take those opportunities and convey messages to the relevant audience and to the relevant personas through the relevant verticals, through all the relevant channels in a coordinated way, where assets are created in a much more effective manner, that are used in a much more favorable way. It's all of that kind of operating model activity set that needs to fall into place to again, as I said, sort of differentiate those that win and those that struggle.
There's really certainly a lot to look forward to. I mean, a lot of possibly topsy-turvy times still ahead, but get over those humps as we have in with past uncertainties as well. Thank you so much for this thoughtful, wonderful conversation today. So many great takeaways with this.
Exactly. Thank you again, Joy, for your time as well. Really appreciate it.